All right, so I've already wrote my slab, and I am making a clay pocket with this slab. So with your clay pocket, if you want it to be the perfect shape or size of something, we can always cut out a template out of paper, or you could trace around a container. You could trace around your board. You could trace around the slip container, or you can also just cut it freehand. I'm gonna cut mine freehand today. So whenever I cut clay, I like to make the drawing of what I wanna make in the clay first. That way, if I don't like something, I can take my finger and just smooth that back out and I don't have to use that. Once I've got the line, I'm gonna cut through the clay. I'm gonna set the extra scraps aside. We can use those for adding decorations. We can use those for making part of our pocket. So once I've done that, I'm going to set this aside. I'm gonna put this on my board. These boards should stay wrapped in plastic, so keep them the way they are. The rest of my clay, my extra stuff, I'm going to squish back up into a clay ball and roll a new slab. If you don't quite have enough, let Mrs. Hayes know. You can get a little bit more clay. And when I roll my slab, I wanted to keep it even. If you're doing this without the slats, you can also use pencils. And what this does is it keeps it from getting too thin. It also keeps it from being too thick. And I'm going to compare this to my first piece of clay. And if I want it to match perfectly, I'm going to layer it back on top and I'm going to trace around so that I know that it's going to fit. Now I will not need that entire piece of clay for the pocket. So I'm going to use about half of it. So I'm going to draw that line as a reminder. And then I'm going to cut around my outline. Keep in mind that anything smaller than your pinky is very likely to break in the kiln, so we do need to be using that as a size reminder. Set all that stuff aside, and my pocket will be connected here. Before I can connect it, I do need some newspaper. You're going to roll this up into a ball. It is helpful if you take another piece and wrap around it to make that a little bit more smooth. The reason why we want that a little smoother is so that it does not get stuck inside your clay. And it needs to fit inside, meaning it doesn't hang over the edges of the clay. So now before I attach this, I'm going to score the edges of my clay. So that's the right size. And then I'm going to score 3 edges of this. I don't need to score the top up here, and I don't need to score this piece because that part will not be attached. Then I'm going to put the newspaper, actually first I'm going to slip. Slip is that watery clay, we use it like glue. Brush that on. And then the newspaper is going to go inside of here, and I'm going to put my scored edges together. Now at this point, you may have to stretch your clay a little bit, and that's okay. We just want to make sure we don't make holes. And we also want to make sure that the newspaper stays inside. So having a partner kind of help you pinch this together is fine. If it turns out your newspaper is too big, then take some of the newspaper off before you connect it. We do want the paper to be able to come out once it's dry. You will be leaving that newspaper in there, and Mrs. Hayes will take the newspaper out right before she puts it in the kiln to fire it. Now, if you don't want your pocket to leak, or if you don't want things to fall out of your pocket, if you're gonna put pencils in it, plants in it, I mean, there are lots of things you could do with this, then you have to make sure your edges are smooth. And I'm just using my finger to do that. You also want to make sure you smooth out any edges that you have cut because clay that has been fired can be sharp if we haven't smoothed that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if you want this to hang up somewhere, it is going to be important that you make 1 or more holes to hang this up. You cannot add that after it's been fired. At this point, I'm ready to decorate my pocket. Maybe I want to do some texture and designs. If I want to add anything 3-dimensional, if I want to add decorations to it, now is the time to do that. So if I wanted to add something with score and slip, I'm going to score here, and add slip. Press that in place. Maybe I want to carve my initials into this. Remember that any carving that you do, smooth it out because that will be sharp after it's fired. If you're not done with it, you're going to put a piece of paper with your name and class on it and put it inside of a bag. Make sure the bag is sealed and that we can see your name and class. Push out any extra air, and this will go on the clay cart. If it is all done, you are going to leave it on the board with your name and class, and we're going to let this dry. Mrs. Hayes will fire it, and then we'll talk later about how we will be finishing these.